everybody, and welcome to Get Dunked On the podcast. I'm Brian.
And I'm Michelle.
Hey, wow, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, it's usually this is Get Dunked On the podcast, but you know what? We're doing things differently today. We're shaking it up.
This is the Breen and Michelle show.
That's right, absolutely. And because we kind of have the house to ourselves today, what we're gonna do is something very special. We had talked about continuing on with our topic that we had discussed previously from that we were going to do as a group, but then we decided, screw that. We're going to do something fun this week, something that we kind of are very passionate about, which is game lore. Specifically, we each kind of picked a game from a franchise or series that we didn't think maybe doesn't get quite enough love, or maybe we think that their stories are a bit more interesting than people tend to give them credit for. And we want to kind of go into a deep dive today and just kind of have some fun with it. And for those of you listening at home, if you recognize these franchises or have never heard of them, you might find the lore interesting on its own. So, Michelle, would you want to start us off today? What game did you pick? Or franchise?
So interesting enough, I picked a franchise that I've literally never played a minute of in my entire life. But I've watched most of the games be played. I haven't seen the newer ones be played, but I've watched most of them be played from beginning to end. And the thing is like, I'm sure that people who have played them do realize it has a deep story, but to me, I don't know if anybody quite realizes how intricate every detail in the story is, and that is the Metal Gear Solid series.
You know what? I'm glad that you ended up going Metal Gear Solid for this, because I've played Metal Gear Solid, never beat it, but I played that game, and it was fun. But man, it's all over the place. It's. I could tell there's a story there. It was just so off the wall, some of the weird and funky characters. So, clarification would be great.
And like a lot of series, they don't release in the order that they take place, which is almost every franchise ever. So it's Metal Gear Solid takes place in, I think, the 90s or something, but the story starts back in 1918. So it's
seriously?
There's a lot of stuff going on that takes place in the various other games and side games and stuff like that.
Do you know how many Metal Gear games there are total?
So, of the canon ones,
well, I mean, canon or non-canon, and just approximate number is fine. I was just curious.
We're going for the canon, and I have 10 games worth of stuff.
Oh my god, and that's just canon, not including spin-offs or pachinko.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Well, please, the floor is yours. As I'd love for you to kind of deep dive for us and take us down I'm basically going to be sitting back and listening for a little while, because I'm fascinated to know more about this.
All right, so I want to give credit where credit is due right now. I did not have enough time to plan as much as I would have liked to for this, so I am using a website, Metal Gear Timeline. I just want to give credit to them, because they did all the hard work, and I'm just kind of using it to educate.
No, that's perfect.
All right, so literally just the way that they set this up is they set this up year by year order. Has nothing to do with release dates, has nothing to do with anything. It just goes, okay, this is the year and this is what happened. And it does clarify what game it's from if it matters to you. To me, that doesn't matter as much, because it's just, I'd rather see the overarching story rather than being okay, this fact comes from this.
Sure, that makes sense.
Okay, so the Metal Gear games here start in, like I said, 1918 is the oldest, most significant event for it. And what occurs in 1918 is that the Philosophers, an organization that aims to control everything, being economics, politics, and power, is created by the joined forces of Russia, China, and the USA. It is not known who the Philosophers are.
1918, you said?
1918.
Okay.
So this is coming fresh out of World War I.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, is that it's yeah, okay.
So Russia, China, and the USA create this organization to try to have power basically over the world, but no one really knows who is in it.
That's interesting, especially considering that China was not on the side of Russia and the U.S. during World War One. So okay,
Right.
yeah, okay.
So then the next event that's listed, it kind of jumps forward. I'm assuming they spend probably the next 20 years just being low key, gathering resources or whatever. But in 1939, during World War II, the philosophers make a pact that leads to the creation of the philosopher's legacy. The legacy contains $100 billion,
Oh my
as well as the
God!
names. Yeah, as well as the names of the secret members of the organization.
$100 billion.
Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm assuming they spent those 21 years gathering $100 billion.
Yeah, but there's back in those days, like I mean, obviously we're dealing with the game world, so like, you have to take it for what it is. But like, there wasn't even that much money in the world at that point. Basically, these guys are awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it is a game world, but obviously there's a lot of stuff that's not realistic, but I mean, it does take place in a very kind of realistic Earth. So
sure. But like and this is just me joking around, but like I'm thinking to myself, man, their mission's over. They did it. Whatever they were hoping to accomplish, having $100 billion is good enough. But
right.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so then in 1946, so now again, I'm assuming that this gap is also now caused by the fact that World War II was taking place, and they probably got a little busy with that. So after World War II, the money of the philosopher's legacy gets stolen, hidden, and spread across several banks. The records of the transactions were stored in a microfilm. Whoever obtains the microfilm can gain access to the legacy. Of course, Russia, China, and the US are all interested in finding it to obtain leading power. So now this organization that's been created between the three of them, they're kind of like, shit, we're going to compete with each other to get our hands back on the resources.
Yeah, we got a lot of infighting. Okay.
All right, so in 1954, after Stalin's mandate, Russia is led by Nikita Khrushchev, I believe is how you pronounce it. Then in 1961, the next major event that takes place is Russian nuclear scientist Nikolai Sokolov starts working on a new Russian nuclear weapon called the Shagohod.
Okay.
So, and then in 1962, a bunch of shit starts to go down. 1962 is a busy year in this timeline. It emerges that Russia is deploying intermediate range ballistic missiles to Cuba, which is one of their allied countries. This is extremely alarming for the US, since Russia could potentially attack him if the nukes reach Cuba. So this is kind of like an in-game
the Cuban Missile Crisis,
too for and also, the Cold War is also a huge part of it too.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
So while that is going on, Nikolai starts being scared by his own creation and decides to defect to the US. He escapes from Russia with his family, but gets recognized and stopped in Berlin. So he was creating this Shagohod weapon, becomes afraid of it, tries to leave out, and Berlin stops him. So back in the US, President Kennedy demands that Russia dismantles the nukes, but Russia refuses. The US and Russia are placed into alert for an all-out nuclear war. Eventually, Russia decides to dismantle the nukes, but in exchange, they want Nikolai back in Russia. So he is sent back to Russia to resume work on the Shagohod.
So in other words, like literally this guy was so important to them, they were willing to dismantle a nuke just to get this one scientist back.
Right.
Okay.
For this project.
Gotcha.
Then the CIA creates the FOX unit, which stands for Force Operation X. And this is a group used to accomplish special secret operations. FOX is led by a man named Major Zero. So this is the in-game, they're the top guys when you want stuff done.
Yeah, they're the SEAL Team 6-esque people.
Yep.
Right, okay.
Yep. So in order to provide tactical support to Fox, Major Zero creates a shadow military group, XOF, and puts a man called Skullface at its lead.
The guy's name is Skullface?
Yeah. So you have Fox and XOF Fox is led by Major Zero, and XOF is led by Skullface.
Okay.
All right. So in 1964, the U.S. sends the Boss, their best agent, to Russia in an attempt to find the philosopher's legacy.
So they send their best guy into Russian territory to find basically their part of the billions of dollars.
Their best woman.
Oh.
So she's their best agent. They're trying to find that philosopher's legacy that was stolen during World War II.
Gotcha. Okay.
Fox then sends their secret agent Naked Snake to Russia in the attempt to find and recover Nikolai Sokolov, the scientist, and destroy the Shagohod. The mission is called Virtuous Mission. Throughout the mission, Naked Snake is supported via radio by the other members of Fox, Major Zero, Sigint, and Paramedic.
So the person they send in his name is actually Naked Snake?
His code name is Naked Snake,
Great.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
While being close to accomplishing his mission, Naked Snake is stopped by his mentor, the Boss. It seems like the Boss has defected to Russia and has become a traitor to the U.S.
How could she?
Russia is military represented by the Spetsnaz GRU.
Oh, yeah.
Their military force. A rebel group led by Colonel Volgin aims to oppose Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, who was put in place by Stalin in the 50s.
Okay.
The Boss gives Russia an American nuclear head, which is used by Colonel Volgin to destroy a Russian research facility. In this way, it looks like the U.S. attacked Russia, a very ingenious move set up by Russia.
Yeah, because then they could blame America for an attack and then use that to ramp up their own.
Yep, because she gave them the nuclear head. So the U.S. is now required by Russia's President Khrushchev to prove that they are not involved in the nuclear attack set up by the Boss and Volgin. They therefore decide to send Naked Snake back to Russia with the goal to fulfill that request. Get rid of the Boss, Naked Snake's own mentor, and Colonel Volgin. This is called Operation Snake Eater.
Oh, now okay, that game came out for PlayStation 2, right? I'm almost positive.
Yes, this is Metal Gear Solid 3, which was for PS2.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. So this is the first, like, I'm not gonna say, like, I'm sure, I don't know if the other ones you could play through those or whatever, but this is the first one that I recognize as a game that I remember hearing about. So okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff I've read up to this point was history given to you within Metal Gear Solid 4. And then the rest of this so far has been from Metal Gear Solid 3, with the exception of the part about Skullface, which was introduced in 5.
Okay, I'm with you. Also, the fact that they trusted a guy named Skullface is already off the chart, but okay.
So, revealed in 5, but not 3, Major Zero decides to secretly deploy Skullface, head of XOF, to assist Naked Snake during this mission. Nobody else knows about Skullface's involvement during these events.
Oh, snap. So he's really in the shadows.
Yes. So now we're back to 3 again. The KGB puts the Fox unit in contact with 2 NSA agents who defected to Russia in 1960, codenames Adam and Eva. Adam will help Naked Snake get some intel and eventually escape.
Okay, that makes sense.
At the rendezvous point, only Eva shows up, saying she was sent in Adam's place. Naked Snake and Eva are attacked by a military unit led by Ocelot. Ocelot takes Eva as hostage, but is eventually defeated and forced to retreat.
I recognize him from Metal Gear Solid, so he's obviously kind of a legacy character then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of these characters have been around for a really long time.
Gotcha. Okay, so but this is the first time that canonically in the timeline that we see Ocelot.
Yeah, and he's not even yes.
Okay.
So he's called Ocelot at this time. So Naked Snake and Eva figure out that Colonel Volgin is in possession of the Philosopher's legacy.
Okay.
On the mission to find the Shagohod, Naked Snake faces and defeats all the members of the Cobra unit except for the boss. And their names are the Pain, the Fury, the End, the Fear, and the Sorrow.
Gotcha.
During an interrogation being held by Colonel Volgin, the boss and Ocelot, so Volgin, the boss, and Ocelot are interrogating him. Naked Snake is hit by a bullet and loses one of his eyes.
Oh, snap.
After this, Naked Snake is able to destroy the Shagohod and defeat Colonel Volgin. What Naked Snake doesn't know is that Eva is actually a spy from the Chinese government, because China also wanted their hands on the Philosopher's legacy. Eva eventually manages to obtain the microfilm from Colonel Volgin, but it's later revealed that that microfilm was actually a fake. The real one was obtained by Ocelot, who is a triple agent working for the Philosophers.
What?
Ocelot was in fact Adam, but no one knew about it.
What?
So he is working for all of them.
So he literally was playing every side twice, basically.
Pretty much.
Tight. Okay,
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Ocelot gives the legacy to the US, but only half of it is recovered. It is assumed that the remaining half is in KGB hands. So now they have, $500 billion given to the US. Plus, I'm assuming some of the names.
Wow.
After all this shit goes down, Naked Snake discovers that the boss did not defect to the US, but was following orders all along. She was ordered by the government to gain the trust of Volgin by giving him the nuclear warhead, and her goal, of course, was to gain access to the legacy. What they didn't expect was that Volgin would actually use the nuclear warhead on the Russians to incriminate the US. So at that point, the US revised the boss's mission. She then had to play along with her role, and she had to wait to be killed by Naked Snake in order to save the US from being incriminated. She was a hero for her country, but she's forever remembered as a traitor.
So wait, so she was a good guy the whole time. Wow. So she was a good guy.
But
yeah,
she had to die at the hands of Naked Snake.
No kidding. So he gets to be a
save the
hero,
US.
and she gets to be remembered as a villain, even though she was like the real hero of the story.
Yep,
Oh, that blows.
that it does. It's such
I know we
ass.
should have said spoilers before this whole thing started, but like I don't care because these games.
This game is like 20
I know
years
all
old.
the games we're going to talk about are decades old at this point, but like that doesn't. Yeah, that is cool. Okay, all right, I'm on board. I'm really into this right now. Story time is going well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So after this, the U.S. awards Naked Snake with the new title of Big Boss.
Oh shit! So Naked Snake becomes the new big boss. Okay, got it.
Now, interesting factoid from Metal Gear Solid 5, which you did not see in 3. Being forced to live in the shadow, Skullface develops hatred for Major Zero and Naked Snake.
Okay.
So he's not happy with his shadow life.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Shocker that the guy they put in the shadows doesn't like being in the shadows.
So after Naked Snake becomes Big Boss, Ocelot talks on the phone with the KGB chief director, discussing the role of Khrushchev, who is thrown out of office soon after this. And pissed off by what the government did to him and the boss, Big Boss leaves Fox, shortly followed by Major Zero, who was the head of the military group.
Okay.
So they were like, wow, that was really fucking shitty that you did that to her. And
Yeah.
I'm peacing out.
Yeah. Okay. I can understand that move.
So Major Zero, Ocelot, and Big Boss are now using the legacy to reorganize the Philosophers. They form the Patriots and make Big Boss the face of the organization.
Okay.
The goal of the Patriots is to fill the boss's dream of creating a unified world.
Okay.
And Major Zero starts spreading stories about Big Boss. Some of them are true and others are false, so tension between the two arises.
Okay.
All right, so that's where we finally leave the year 1964, I believe it was.
Wow. That was all in a single... Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was a hell of a
Big
year.
time.
All right, so now we're going to jump forward to 1970, and now we are back in history that's displayed in Metal Gear Solid 4. So,
That's Guns of the
Navajo
Patriots,
Nation,
right? Okay.
Yes. I think so, yes. The Navajo Nation in the U.S. is rich of uranium ore that could be used for nuclear weaponry. A Navajo man called Code Talker starts researching microbes capable of deactivating uranium. Code Talker also studies the remains of the Cobra unit member The End and discovers the parasites that enhance his abilities. These parasites exist in several forms, one of them being the vocal cord parasite, which is capable of infecting people speaking a specific language. The philosophers try to replicate the parasites, but eventually abandon the project. Unfortunately, I wish I could remember what The End was like, but I don't right now. But he was a very fascinating boss. I do remember that.
Okay, that'll be we'll call that the homework for the for the podcast.
Right.
Is everybody at home has to look up this guy.
During the Cold War, a Soviet woman dies giving birth to her son. One day, this kid, named Tretij Rebonok, Tretij Rebenok, acknowledged his psychic power after managing to read his dad's mind. He discovered that his dad hates him to death. Angered, the kid kills his dad, burning down his entire village.
Oh, okay. Because, psychic power, burning down the village, usual stuff.
Right. So in 1971, the former leader of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, dies of a heart attack. In 1972, Major Zero secretly starts a project called Les Enfants Terribles with the goal to create clones of the greatest soldier of all time, Big Boss. To do this, he uses Eva as a surrogate mother.
So, okay, one second here. Big Boss is still alive right now, right?
Yes.
But he's clearly not had any children, so they're going to clone him. And
Correct.
is that by his choice, or is this just they decided to do this?
It's a secret project, so I do not think this was his choice.
Okay. And then the surrogate mother is somebody named Eva?
Yeah, so Eva was the one that was helping Naked Snake, who was the Chinese spy.
Oh, okay, I'm with you. Yes, that's the, yes, okay.
Okay, so now in 1972, during this cloning project, the twin brothers Liquid Snake and Solid Snake are born. They are considered imperfect clones. A third perfect clone is produced, Solidus Snake.
Solid Snake, Liquid Snake, and then the other one was what?
Solidus.
Solidus?
Yeah, Solidus.
Okay. I am on board. All right.
All these clones are given accelerated aging genes in order to avoid them being used or revolting against the Patriots.
Okay.
Big Boss finds out about this project, which culminates in his total outrage. Big Boss believes that Major Zero and the Patriots misinterpreted the original beautiful idea that the boss had. So Big Boss leaves the Patriots. Major Zero renames both himself and his organization as Cypher.
Okay.
Big Boss creates his own mercenary military group called the Militaires Sans Frontières. Their goal is to provide military force for anyone who needs them, regardless of nations or ideologies.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So now we're jumping into Metal Gear Solid PW.
Peace Walker.
Yes, thank you. I I'm like, I was not expecting this to
Well,
abbreviate
it's
that.
funny because like I know the names of all these games. I haven't played one of them, but like I've been around this. I guess I've been around the scene so long that I've heard the names.
Yeah. So Metal Gear Solid is so expansive that I'm gonna go into 1974 here, and that's the last year that we're gonna leave off for now.
Okay.
So it emerges that Costa Rica is being oppressed by an unknown military army, possibly in possession of nuclear warheads. So Big Boss and his military unit are asked by the Costa Rica forces, represented by Galvez and Paz, to intervene and stop the military army. They offer Big Boss an operative plant in the Caribbean Sea called Mother Base. So Big Boss accepts and goes to Costa Rica, supported via radio by the sub-commander Kaz Miller. Big Boss gets confirmation of the presence of nuclear warheads. Big Boss meets Amanda, the leader of the resistance in Costa Rica. She confirms that the opposing forces are backed up by CIA. Her brother Chico gets kidnapped by a drone. Big Boss convinces her to join his military and goes in a mission to rescue Chico and track down the nuclear warheads. Big Boss is able to rescue Chico, who also joins his military unit. He proceeds in his mission to find the nuclear warhead. It emerges that Hot Cold Man, a CIA agent, wants to use the Metal Gear, created by scientist Huey Emmerich, to launch a warhead and test its effectiveness.
So this is the first time we're actually seeing a Metal Gear then.
Yes.
Okay.
So Cold Man attacks Huey Emmerich, who is later helped on by Big Boss. Emmerich reveals Coldman's plan. His military army is in possession of a Metal Gear, codenamed Peace Walker, capable of selecting suitable targets for nuclear retaliation without the need of human involvement. The AI of this Metal Gear, developed by the scientist Dr. Strangelove, is shaped and following the personality traits of the boss.
Can you back it up a little bit? The guy's name is Dr. Strangelove?
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking on that.
Kojima gives a lot of references to things that he's a huge fan of, and that's one of them.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I get the reference and everything, but I'm just saying, like, it's funny because Kojima is such a he's an interesting dude.
Yeah, he is.
So the Metal Gear's movements are similar to that of Big Boss's? Is that the way? I'm sorry, that last little part there confused me. Can you, like, when you say that the last like two sentences again?
Okay. No, so it's the AI of this Metal Gear is shaped following the personality traits of the boss.
Oh.
So they're trying to take her, what they think is her, what they are interpreting as what her vision of the unified world was, and programming the Metal Gear to what they think she would do in terms of selecting people that it would be okay to nuke.
Oh boy. That's it's fun, it's interesting, but it's also like they're trying to program an AI, based on what they think a person's belief system was. Wow.
So Big Boss has to stop Hot Coldman, who is the CIA agent, and Huey Emmerich, the scientist behind the Peace Walker Metal Gear, or who has been working with it, joins Big Boss's military unit.
Ooh, that's a good pickup.
Hot Coldman tries to hack the AI of the Peace Walker in order to make it attack this military unit. It is revealed that Galvez, the guy from Costa Rica, has always worked together with Coldman, but intended to betray him, because he wants the Peace Walker to attack Cuba from a U.S. base. So this will incriminate the U.S. and split the North and South, giving a strong advantage to Russia. So we're back to that same thing.
Yeah, so it kind of goes right round back to that same idea. But I like that.
So he shoots Hot Coldman and forces Dr. Strangelove to reprogram the AI to attack Cuba. In reality, he reprograms it to fake a nuclear attack towards Cuba and make the attack seem Russian-driven. And now the U.S. is ready to fire back with their nuclear war power because now they're pissed.
Yeah.
The Peace Walker, driven by the will of the boss AI, sacrifices itself by drowning itself in a lake, destroying the fake signal and preventing a nuclear war.
So literally, the new big boss there, he tried to start a nuclear war essentially, and
no, he was trying.
He was trying to prevent it. Yeah, but I thought you said that they had him reprogram it, and then the system itself like sacrificed itself to prevent that from going through with the Cuba thing.
The people from Costa Rica.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, okay, now I understand. Yes. Okay, that makes more sense. That makes way more sense. So that yeah.
So the
saves the legacy.
So the Metal Gear sacrifices itself. Yep. So the mission is completed, and Big Boss go back to Mother Base to start working on their own Metal Gear called ZEKE Zeke.
Huh.
The other person from Costa Rica, Paz, steals and takes control of Zeke, claiming that she is taking it back to their leader named Cypher. She accuses Big Boss of having taken the wrong path since he parted ways with his former Fox Commander Major Zero 2 years earlier. So Paz asks Big Boss to join them, but he refuses. She plans to use the Metal Gear to launch nukes at the U.S. and frame Big Boss and his military unit for the attack. A fight starts and Big Boss destroys Metal Gear Zeke. Paz is hit by the explosion and is supposed dead. Dr. Strangelove leaves the military unit as she believes that her AI development research is not necessary anymore. Big Boss finds out that Cypher is Major Zero.
Okay, yeah, and so then he kind of figures that one out. All right.
Yeah. So Big Boss tells his troops that they will serve under anyone regardless of nations and ideologies again, and they would soon build a nation they would call their own called Outer Heaven.
So wait, now Big Boss is kind of shifting his priority to building his own nation?
Yeah, so he's like, we'll still serve people, but we're going to build our own nation called Outer Heaven.
Cool. All right.
And then Metal Gear Solid 5 just adds on to this a little bit, where it is revealed that all of these events were orchestrated by Cypher, who knew that Big Boss was the only one capable of building Mother Base and growing such a strong military force. Their goal was eventually to take control of Mother Base, which is why Paz tried to convince Big Boss to join Cypher. Skullface, the leader of XOF, meets Code Talker, who is in need of funding for his microbes research. Skullface, without the permission of Major Zero, funds the research but forces him to study the potential in nuclear research. The research leads to the development of different microbes called the Archaea, holding several enhancing proprietaries useful for military purposes. So they start finding out that they can genetically enhance soldiers, basically.
This Code Talker guy is all doing that research based on one boss that was fought from Snake Eater.
Correct.
Just because his blood was weird, essentially? Okay.
Yes.
This one random boss seems way more important than...
Yep. So that is, so that's up through 1974 there with some of the history of the Metal Gear Solid thing. So the only other thing that I wanted to share, which I thought was cool, was in my research of just trying to find things about Metal Gear Solid, especially things like people might not know. One of the most interesting things I found is that I believe for probably Metal Gear Solid, the developers initially built their levels using Legos. Because 3D design was pretty new at the time, so they really wanted to understand what it would actually look like, so they built a bunch of levels with Legos, and I thought that was cool as hell.
It is. It's actually hilarious. I mean, to be fair with you, developers can do some weird stuff, but building them out of Legos, that's kind of fun. Not bad. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I learned a lot, just listening to that, and truthfully, if this wasn't an hour-long podcast, I'd say continue on because I'd love to hear more because
it's
it's
lengthy.
a franchise. It's a good franchise though, and it's one that the games really aren't for me. I don't know how else to describe it, but they're just not my style of game to play through.
No, that's exactly how I feel. I'm not a stealth person. I'm not a sneak around and find stuff person, like, and that's largely what they are. But like I said, I enjoyed watching the hell out of them because they have such a fascinating story.
Exactly. And I guess we'll kind of transition over to the one that I was going to talk about. It's funny. For as much as we haven't played that game, that series, I've played the opposite amount, meaning like pretty much all of this one that I'm about to talk about, which is Castlevania. That's the series that I chose for this one. I chose this for not because it's. I was going to say not because it's Konami and we're having a theming, but the truth is that I absolutely adore the Castlevania franchise. It is one of the most like engaging and like thematically some of the best franchises for me, and I've played through a good majority of all the games. There's 41 total games.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's about a huge
but like
series.
Not all of them are canon by any stretch, thankfully.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah,
and I was gonna say I'm also equally fascinated by this because I have not played much of them. I tried playing the NES game as a kid. It was too hard for me as a kid, and I just never got back into it. And the only Castlevania game I've played is Symphony of the Night.
Okay, so then I can kind of go into the detail on those ones especially too, because you'll recognize them. But yeah, I won't go into my whole history with Castlevania, but I absolutely adore the series, and I want to talk about like the timeline for this one. Thankfully, just like the Metal Gear, there's a clear and apparent timeline. They said, no, there's a timeline, and here it is, and they just went boom, and they laid it out for you. And because they did that, it's so nice.
And I'm assuming, like other series, it probably didn't come out in that order.
Oh God, no. We're literally gonna jump from PlayStation 2 to NES. Like it's gonna jump all over the place. So starting with the very first one, which is as far as timeline rise, I should say, is Castlevania: Lament of Innocence, which takes place in the year 1094 AD.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, I know, right? This is a game that came out for PlayStation 2.
I mean, I knew it had like very deep roots as far as like history, but like I didn't realize it went back that far.
Yeah, I mean, like there's huge gaps in time, but like this is like the farthest back it goes. So during this one, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on this one just because it's super important, but basically this lays out the whole foundation of the series. And for most people who have played the games, they just go, oh, it's the one about the vampire, or you kill Dracula at the end and you use the whip and you run around and whoosh, it's over, right? But there's so much depth to the story. So back in those days, it was a time of knights and medieval monarchs and warlords kind of fighting over the land, right? But two knights were at the peak. The two knights were Leon Belmont and a guy named Mathis. I can't say his name, but Cornquivist. I'm gonna call him Mathis because that's easier to say. But anyway, Leon and Mathis. Leon was the greatest warrior of all time. Like he was just like the most, like devout, badass guy. And Mathis was the tactician. So between the two of them, they were unstoppable, right?
Okay, so the bronze in the brain.
Yes, exactly. They're the bronze in the brain. And so what happened is that they're out on a mission for the church and the whole nine. They come back home and Mathis's wife is dead. She had gotten sick while they were gone, and she died. So what happened? So he goes into a deep depression. Mathis does, and he's bedridden. He's just like, just go out, go do whatever you got to do. I need to mourn. So
he gives up.
Yeah, he basically gives up and lays down and he's in mourning. So Leon is out and about fighting the wars, doing his thing, when out of nowhere Mathis comes up to him and says, hey, we got a problem. You know your fiance, Sarah? He goes, yeah. Well, she's kind of been stolen. So what are you talking about? So apparently a guy, a vampire, his name is Walter Bernard, was a powerful vampire that lived in a forest of eternal night. And what had happened is that Mathis tells him that the vampire that is, took his fiance and basically was egging Leon to come get him. So Leon marches, of course, or he goes, I'm going to go get her. The church says, no, you can't. You got to stay and fight our wars for you. He goes, screw you guys, and he separates from the church. So he literally renounces everything that he's ever believed in, his country, his faith, everything. So
to go after
to go after Sarah. So he lays it all on the line, and he goes there. As he gets closer to the castle itself, just outside the castle, he meets up with another guy, and his name I gotta try to find it real quick. He meets up with a guy who basically tells him that his daughter had been taken at one point, by the same vampire, and he had tried to go in and fight him, and he couldn't do it, and he failed. But he was a man of science, and so he was an alchemist. So what he does is he creates this whip called the Whip of Alchemy, and he gives it to Leon. He says, with this whip, you should be able to go in and, fight the forces of evil and make this happen. Sounds good. So he goes in, he goes through, and he fights his way through, and he eventually gets to where Walter is, and Walter says, "Oh, hey, remember that fiance, your future wife? Oh yeah, here she is back." And he gives it to her, but she's a vampire, right? He cursed her to be a vampire.
Oh man.
Yeah, so it's kind of this really sad moment. But what happens is that instead of I'm sorry, I should have mentioned one thing. He tried to fight Walter, and it didn't go well. Like, the whip wasn't working. But anyway, the point is that Sarah decides, you know what, I'm willingly giving up my soul. Please kill me, and she sacrifices herself, right? So what happens is that she sacrifices herself and lets Leon kill her with the whip. But why this is important, why I tell this whole story basically, is that the whip needed a tainted but willing soul to become whole. So basically, her soul is tainted because she's vampire, but she was willing to go into it, and basically the whip ceases to become the whip of alchemy and has now become the vampire killer whip, which is
so that's where that came from.
That's where that came from. So like the whip that they use throughout the entire series is literally the soul of Leon's wife, essentially.
Okay.
So that's why it's so connected to the Belmonts, and it's fueled by essentially the power of love, and also the ability to kill vampires because it's fused with the vampire soul, right? So it can kill anything that is a vampire or related to vampires. That's why everything else is affected by it. So point is, he uses that new whip, and he marches his way up and fights Walter.
And I'm assuming it goes better.
And it goes much better,
point.
right? But here's the part that I said, I've taken a long time on the first one, but I have to do this in order to make it all work. The reason that all this matters is because Walter is a vampire, and he has eternal darkness around him, as I mentioned before, because he has this special stone and whatever, but it doesn't matter. The point is that he thought that he was literally invincible, and he was really bored. So what he would do is take people from take loved ones and then torture them. But this all comes down to the head of, all right, Leon has him down, the guy's about to die, he goes, whatever, you strike me down, I'm just going to resurrect again, no big deal. And then out from the shadow steps Mathis. This whole thing was orchestrated by him. So what happened is, going back, Mathis, when everyone thought he was in mourning, had basically gone and made deals with multiple parties. He made a deal with Walter where he said, hey, you know how you're always looking for a challenge and wanting to not be bored? This Leon guy, he's legendary. Oh, you should steal his fiance. The guy's like, and so he manipulated the vampire. He also told the vampire, he goes, well, you're immortal. He goes, you can't be killed. And more, it's because you have this dark stone that you have. But there's two stones. There's the ebony stone, and then there's the crimson stone. The ebony stone, the one that he had, lets him have eternal darkness, but it doesn't make him immune to death. But because Mathis was so clever, he made a deal with Death as well. And so Death was like, talked to Walter and was like, hey, I'm totally your servant because you have that stone. So right when he thinks that he's in control of Death, he's never going to die, Mathis steps in and he has the crimson stone. And so what he does is he controls Death, he controls everything. He has that vampire Walter's soul fused into the red stone, and Mathis becomes a vampire. He does this because his goal, his end goal, was to take all of the powers that Walter had, meaning the Ebony Stone and the Crimson Stone's energy. He controls death itself, because whoever holds the Crimson Stone controls literal, like, death is an actual, like, quote unquote person. It's not a person, but you know what I mean. He controls that. So he did all of this because after his wife had died, he wanted to curse God, and the only way he could think to do that was to become immortal and basically spit in the face of God forever by being an immortal bastard. So so that's where this whole story starts, and why death is always around and hanging in the servant of Dracula is because he has this red stone and he controls death. He controls everything, and why he's able to be resurrected all the time. He's literally unkillable. So that's the entire synopsis, essentially, of Lament of Innocence. That's just the first game in the timeline. So from here on, it's more or less, I'm going to call it formulaic, but it's more like straightforward than that. So I can go kind of faster. So then for the next little while, from between the 12th and the 14th centuries, the Belmonts kind of go through a tear through Europe, destroying vampires and basically anything that gets in their way that's supernatural.
Okay, so serious question.
Yeah.
I know you're trying to go a little faster. So yeah. Leon Belmont's wife has sacrificed herself.
Yes.
So how does the Belmont clan continue? Like, did he have, like, brothers and sisters? Like, where do they come from then?
Yeah. So the Belmont clan is made up of, like, they might have 3 brothers or something like that, but, like, it's whoever has an heir.
There was a lot of them.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay, I was just like, because when you said that, I was like, wait, where did they come from?
It's usually father to son is how it kind of works in that regard, as far as, like, how they pass it down. But they definitely, especially during those early days, there was a lot of Belmonts. Okay. And then, like, as time goes on, there's very fewer and fewer Belmonts.
Okay, all right. I was just curious at where they came from. Knowing that his wife had died, I was like, okay, who's doing this then?
Yeah, I'm with you. So basically, Leon walks the path of the vampire hunter, kills, everything that moves, basically. But during this time, Dracula does a few things. He gains a lot more power because he, gains mastery over, both those gems that I talked about. Plus, he's building an army of the damned, just all sorts of monsters. And he takes the name Dracula Vlad Tepes. I'm sure you recognize that name from real life, and also Bram Stoker and all that stuff. So that happens, and he kind of goes into hiding during that time. Fast forward now to 1476, and this is the third NES game, which is Castlevania 3: Dracula's Curse. So what happens here is Dracula unleashes his army, and is basically, it's a giant genocide. He's wiping out humanity off the earth, right? So the church says, you know what, we're going to send all of our best, people in there, and then we're going to take care of this. They all die. Everybody's dead. So the church goes, crap, we have no one left to send. What are we going to do? Well, we could turn to the Belmonts who we exiled all those years ago, and that's exactly what happens. Trevor Belmont comes out of the woodwork, at the request of the church, being essentially reinstated a little bit to fight Dracula. This is also our first time meeting Alucard. So that's kind of a big deal. This is Dracula's son, and we finally get to see him and meet him and all that. He fights with Trevor, of course, against Dracula. Also, the 2 other people is Grant and Sypha. Sypha and Trevor actually end up getting married, which is, post game and all that stuff. You don't really see that in the game necessarily, but it does happen. And they take care of Dracula, and Alucard goes back into his he goes into slumber, which means that he basically says, well, I'm done with the world, and he goes to bed. So he's out of the picture. 3 years later, during 1479, this is when Castlevania Curse of Darkness happens. This follows a guy named Hector. He's not a Belmont necessarily, I don't think. I don't think he's a Belmont, but he's a Devil Forge Master. Basically, what he did was that he worked for Dracula, building the army. That's what he was. And he realized afterward that he had been manipulated and been basically making an army to kill humanity. So he thinks that he's working for the church, but it turns out that Death is trying to manipulate this guy into resurrecting Dracula, but he figures it out and prevents that resurrection from happening. Okay. 100 years later, so 1576, Christopher Belmont. So this is where he comes into play. This is another, regular Belmont story. It is rumored that the Bartley family was responsible for, bringing back Dracula. So the Bartley family is there's a character, and I'm trying to remember her name now, and I have it right here. 1 second. Elizabeth Bartley is his niece, and she's kind of like a secondary antagonist throughout this whole franchise. She basically she might have been involved in resurrecting Dracula. Once again, it's the same sort of story. Christopher Belmont takes on Dracula and vanquishes him. But in 1591, so this is just a few years after that, Christopher is getting ready to pass down the whip to his son, and his son is taken and basically has his mind messed with and that sort of thing, and he has to go through and rescue his son in Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge, which is as I said in 1591. Okay. Now 100 years after that, here's the era that most people know, which is the regular NES game, the first one, Castlevania. This stars Simon Belmont, which is Christopher Belmont's grandson. So this is the fourth Belmont to really interact with Dracula one-on-one. And he's fully revived for the second time, and he goes through and defeats Dracula. But at the end of it, he's struck with a terrible curse. So as he fights Dracula, he's struck with a curse. And 7 years later, in 1698, the curse has gotten so bad that he's going to die. So his body's starting to decay and what have you. So the only way to get rid of the curse is to travel around the country, basically, where they had spread Dracula's pieces and collect them so he can effectively bring Dracula back together so we could just burn him again. And by doing so, it will take away his curse. And that's Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest.
Okay.
So that's the one.
I was going to say, because that story sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
I think I watched you play that.
Yes, well, yeah. I've played pretty much all these at some point, but the first one, regular old Castlevania, that's my jam. But anyway, after that, this is when, and this guy's name is Juste, Juste Belmont. This is one of the first Game Boy Advance games, I should say. It's Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. So 50 years after Simon's battle, this guy, Juste, he's the grandson of Simon. He continues the tradition and upholds the duty. This is a fight not against Dracula himself, but against Dracula's castle, or I guess more importantly, an image of his castle. And because he prevents it from fully forming, it's not really Dracula. So he doesn't actually have to fight Dracula himself, because it's only been 50 years. So after that, in 1792, we get Richter Belmont in Castlevania Rondo of Blood. So this is one that a lot of people will also recognize. Rondo of Blood is the one where Richter,
is this the Genesis one?
No. That comes a little later. That's Bloodlines. This is the one that was Castlevania Dracula X.
Okay. Yep.
So this Dracula's brought back by the dark priest named Shaft, and so Richter's called in. He does his thing, and he slays Dracula. But this is the big thing. Because he's so weakened from fighting Dracula, he doesn't realize it, but Shaft is able to essentially curse Richter. So Richter doesn't realize it at the time, but he's cursed. So what happens is that 5 years later, in 1797, Shaft continues on, and he's still around. It's been 5 years since the previous battle, and what he does is that he takes control of Richter, and so Richter is now essentially working for the bad guys, and you have a Belmont as the bad guy, and this is Symphony of the Night. So this is where now Alucard awakens from his over 300-year slumber, and it's like, God, that
was a nice nap.
Well, yeah, basically. Well, the only reason he woke up was because he didn't sense a Belmont anymore. He goes, something's wrong here.
Shit's fucked up.
Yeah. So anyway, he goes through and does that whole thing. But yes. So after that, Richter kind of has a bit of a, like, after he's freed from it, this is a big turning point because Richter relinquishes the vampire killer whip. He's like, I can't be trusted. I can't use this. We need to seal this whip away from the Belmont clan. And by giving it up, what they're doing is essentially, it's a twofold thing. One, it's kind of a penance thing for what he did, and two, it's storing up its power for what they plan to use it for in the future. And the next few I can just kind of rapid fire because it just kind of goes, bing, bang, boom here. But after that, when the whip is gone, we have a series of games that are not starring Belmonts. So the first one in that list is The Order of Ecclesia, which is basically, it's my least favorite of the Metroidvania style games. But anyway, it stars a person named Shinoa, and she is a person who goes through and fights off Dracula using the abilities of her order. That's basically all it is. After that, and this is the part that's going to blow your mind. Have you ever seen Bram Stoker's Dracula or read it?
I actually have not.
Okay. Well, that's canon, essentially.
Okay.
So there's a character in it named Quincy Morris who defeats Dracula in that film. And the kicker is that they make Quincy Morris out to be a pseudo-descendant of Trevor Belmont. So there's like a blood connection between the Morris family and the Belmont family. And I think that's kind of cool. So what happens is that the whip is actually given to the Morris family. So they're entrusted to take care of the vampire killer whip. So it goes to
so it was sealed off from the Belmonts, but then gets picked up by this family that is very distantly related to the Belmonts.
It wasn't picked up. It was given to the Morrises. Like Richter gave it to Jonathan Morris and all them. So, which is Quincy Morris's son. Yes,
Richter himself unseals it and gives it away.
Well, yeah, Richter gives it away early on to the Morris family, and it's passed down through the Morris family. That's what I meant to try to say. Yeah.
Okay.
So, this is where Castlevania Bloodlines comes in because it's in 1917, where Jonathan Morris, who is the son of Quincy Morris from Bram Stoker's Dracula, goes through and fights Elizabeth Bartley, which is Dracula's niece. Now, Elizabeth Bartley is based on Elizabeth Bathory, whatever, which is a Hungarian serial killer. It's a real life woman. Right, so she's it's messed up. But the point is that he goes through and fights her with the help of his friend. This is a little tidbit because this is just something to mention. The whip, though, because he's using it so much, he used it a lot. Actually, it kills him because he's not a true Belmont. Using the whip continuously will kill you if you're not a Belmont. So the whip after he kills Elizabeth Bartley, but immediately dies afterward. So so the whip then falls to his son, who he didn't train to use it because he didn't want him to die, but still he ends up picking it up and having to use it anyway. Jonathan Morris, which is from Castlevania.
Now, at this point, do they know that he died because of the whip?
In the course of Portrait of Ruin, Jonathan figures out why he died. Yes. But that, which Portrait of Ruin is one of my absolute favorite ones. I'm actually playing through it again now.
But at the time that he initially takes it from his dad, he doesn't know.
No, he's like that game starts off. He's so pissed at his father. He hates his father because he doesn't understand. He's like, why didn't he teach me to fight? Why didn't he teach me how to use the whip? And it's like, well, he would have killed you, man. But anyway, the point is that Jonathan takes over and he fights off a different a different vampire, not Dracula. This is a guy named Bronner who had taken over Dracula's castle and was trying to use it to steal his powers. For the record, by the way, Elizabeth Bartley in 1917, when Jonathan Morris fights her, she's responsible for starting World War One. Just want to make sure to mention
Nice.
that. Yeah, just throwing that little small bit out there. All right, last three, because this is the last little bit. Fast forward from 1944 to 1999, big gap there, but Julius Belmont emerges. There's no game that goes along with this, and I don't know why, but there isn't one. Julius Belmont emerges out of nowhere after umpteen 100 years without a Belmont now, and throughout the course of his time with the whip and everything else, they're able to seal Dracula away. They figure out, well, we can't kill him because death is literally his lackey, so there's no way to kill this guy. So we have to seal him away, and they seal him in a solar eclipse. So he's permanently trapped in a solar eclipse, right? Forever. So that's kind of the end of Dracula himself. After that, in the year 2035, a Dracula is set to return, so to speak, but he can't return in a normal fashion. So instead of it being Dracula, he's essentially reincarnated, meaning there's a kid, his name's Soma Cruz. He's a high school student, and this is where I laugh because it gets very anime in the last two. He's a high school student who's actually Dracula reincarnated and has the same abilities of like absorbing monster souls and this and that, and
okay, so Dracula was trapped in the eclipse, but
Yeah.
the Soma Cruz kid has his
exactly
powers.
has all of his powers.
Okay.
But so the next two games, which is Castlevania Aria of Sorrow in 2035, and then the next one, Dawn of Sorrow, which is in 2036, is basically the story of Soma fighting against the nature of the way he was born, which is fighting against becoming Dracula himself. And thankfully he does not. So that is a grossly abbreviated version of the entire Castlevania timeline, but it is so in-depth and so fun. And if you're ever interested, if this was even vaguely interesting to anyone, if you go to the wiki, every person, every character, they all have their own individual pages. Huge detail of not just the games that they came from, but like background stuff you wouldn't even think to like care or know about these people. But it's a great read. So that's kind of the whole shtick with this, and this leaves out, of course, all the other spin-off games like Kid Dracula or any of the Pachinkos or whatever. So
Right.
So, but anyway, if you're ever interested, there's plenty to read on the internet.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like with your Metal Gear. I definitely learned a lot in that one, and I'm literally going to spend the next like 20 minutes after this podcast looking up the boss, the end, because I want to know, more about like what his blood had to do.
Just watch a YouTube video of like the fight
Okay, that's what I'm going to do.
of between Naked Snake and the end.
Deal. And
And then next time we pick this up, I will continue after the 1974.
Deal. And for those of you at home, if you're going to read any one specifically, I'm telling you, that first one, Lament of Innocence, is one of the best ones because it gives you motivations and makes it so much deeper than you're just going, oh, there's the Dracula, I'm going to whip him in the head.
Because, I mean, I knew the basic storylines of the NES Castlevania games, and like I said, I had played Symphony of the Night. So pretty much what I got of it is like, oh, there's, Alucard hates his dad, these Belmonts hate Dracula, and you just, every time you play a Castlevania game, you're a Belmont who fights Dracula.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty much what I thought it was, and I didn't realize that there was this whole, like, thing about, like, how Dracula was created, why the Belmonts hate him, like...
Oh, yeah, and like the rise and fall and rise of the Belmonts, like throughout history,
Right.
and their associations and this kind of thing. It's, I don't know, I absolutely find it gripping, but, I mean, that again... okay, and I also like the fact that they added Bram Stoker's Dracula as a as a kind of pseudo canon. I mean, with the characters from it. So Jonathan Morris might be one of my all time favorite characters in all of it, and he's not even a Belmont. So, but anyway, Thank you all for joining us today. I don't know about Michelle, but I'm going to say she did. She enjoyed it. She loved this whole thing.
I
Yeah,
did.
see?
I
There
did.
we go. Let's put words in your mouth that it worked anyway. But the point is, we had a very good time, and I hope you can join us next time on, what do you want to call this, Lore Corner?
Sure.
There it is. Well, join us next time, won't you?